Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how you can grow hydrangeas in containers. So hydrangeas are one of my all-time favorite flowers and I love to have them in the garden. But since I garden on a deck, I obviously can't plant them in the ground. So I've been growing hydrangeas in containers for about 3 years now. I just got this one right here. The variety is City Line Paris, and it's from Proven Winners. So I'm going to pop this guy up today, talk to you a little bit about how to care for hydrangeas in containers, and then show you where I'm going to place these in my garden. So the first step is to pick out the right container for your hydrangea. Now hydrangeas don't do well in small containers because they have a pretty robust root system, so it's going to outgrow the container pretty fast. Also, smaller containers tend to dry out much quicker, obviously, than larger containers. So when you're looking for a container, you want to find one that's at a minimum of 18 to 20 inches diameter. And this one is 20 inches across, so it should be perfect for this hydrangea plant. Also with the hydrangea containers, you want to make sure that you have drainage. So this container has a couple drainage holes right there. You can always add in your drainage holes to the container if it doesn't come with it, but hydrangeas like to be moist but not soggy, so you want to be able to water consistently but also have adequate drainage for your plant. So what I'm going to do next is show you what I'm going to put in the container, and then we will get this plant potted up. So in this container I have potting soil. You want to make sure that you're using soil specifically designed for containers. Don't just go out to your yard and use the dirt that you have lying around, because that's going to be too dense for planting in containers. I also added in an inch thick layer of compost, and I use the Purple Cow organic compost just to give it some additional nutrients. You could also add in Hollytone at this stage if you want to. I don't happen to have any on hand, but I think it should do well with just the mixture of soil and a little bit of compost. Now when you're putting the plant into the pot, you want to plant the hydrangea at about the same depth in the soil as it was growing in its previous container. I don't have this completely full of soil because I know I'm going to have to fit the root ball in here, and then I want at least a couple inches at the top of the container in order to water the plant. So we'll get the plant into the pot, and then we'll talk a little bit about care and overwintering. The hydrangea is now in the container. I packed the soil down to make sure that there weren't any air pockets in there. I'm about to give it a good watering, but I did clean up the mess I made from the repotting. If anybody somehow doesn't make a huge mess every time they plant up something, please let me know your secrets in the comments below. But that's exactly why I have a broom out in my garden. So let's get her watered in, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the plant. So now that she's in her container, let's talk a little bit about hydrangea care. So caring for your hydrangea is pretty similar to if you planted it out in the landscape, and the first step is to make sure you're putting it in the right location. Typically hydrangeas prefer morning sun and afternoon shade. Now I'm gardening on a rooftop deck, and the majority of our space is almost full-time sun. It's also a lot hotter up here than it is on the ground, and I've learned through trial and error that my hydrangeas prefer the shadiest spot possible up here, just so they don't get a little crispy on the edges. So where we planted this is actually where it's going to live. This is the south side of our deck. The sun's coming from this direction, so this brick wall right here provides the most shade throughout the day. They do get a little bit of sun in the morning and later in the evenings as the sun is traveling over the deck, and this is where the hydrangeas have been the happiest, so this is where they're going to stay. The second most important thing in caring for your hydrangeas is making sure that they are adequately watered. Like I mentioned before, using larger containers means that you'll have to water less. I recommend watering at least about twice a week, but obviously this is going to change a lot based on your plant size, container size, and the weather. For the first few weeks of June, it was in the high 80s, low 90s, so I was actually watering these either every day or every other day. A good way to tell if your plant needs some water is if the leaves or the petals start to look a little bit droopy, then make sure that you give it a drink. But also I plan to set these up on our drip system so that they're going to get consistent water every other day without me having to worry about it. Next, I want to talk about fertilization. So you don't want to treat hydrangeas the same way you might be treating annuals in your garden where you're fertilizing every few waterings. With hydrangeas, you really only want to fertilize them either in the late winter or in the early spring. If you fertilize them too close in either the late summer or in early fall, that's going to encourage more growth when the shrub really needs to be preparing for winter. Which leads me on to my last point, which is winter care. So like I mentioned, I've been growing hydrangeas in containers for a few years. I've seen what has worked for me and what hasn't worked. So I have unsuccessfully overwintered hydrangeas by just leaving them outside. So I don't recommend doing that if you do live in a colder climate. We're in zone 6 in Chicago. I have successfully though overwintered in the garage. So that's going to be the plan for this winter, I think, although I might test something out that I'll talk about in a little bit. But if you just bring your containers into the garage over winter, make sure you water them. I think I watered about twice so that they don't dry out, and then bring them back out when the weather has warmed up a bit. And I've had hydrangeas that come back every spring by doing that method. Now, since I'm on the roof, the garage is many floors down, and I don't know if I want to carry all of my containers down. So what I'm contemplating doing is getting a small temporary type greenhouse and seeing if I can overwinter them up here on the deck. That way, again, I don't have to carry them up and down, but we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But if I try it out, I'll obviously show you guys, and then we'll see how that works versus the garage comparison next year. But I think that is everything. I love growing hydrangeas in containers. In fact, I don't think there's anything I found so far, any plant that I love that I can't grow in a container in my garden. So if there is a plant that you love, try it out, figure out a container that's going to work for it. Size is going to be the most important, I think, depending on the size of your plant, but really you can grow whatever it is that you want. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.